Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you everybody for joining our session today. It's always a pleasure to join you in similar thought-provoking topics like data mesh and all data topics. So for today, we're going to discuss some strategies and best practices for navigating the implementation of a data mesh. Please allow me first to introduce myself a bit further. So who am I? I'm Hajar. I'm a data engineering lead at SustainCert. And for those of you who don't know SustainCert, we are the world's first digital verification software platform to bring credibility to climate actions. I have also been actively volunteering for science and technology for over 6 years now, while I have been working as an AI and data advocate and consultant with experience in implementing data analytics solutions for Fortune 500 companies in the financial sectors. So for today's session, we're going to have a couple of topics about the data mesh. First, we're going to start by introducing what is it and what are its key principles. Then we're going to discuss why should you implement a data mesh, what are you getting from it, and if you hope to implement it, what are some of the challenges you might face. Then we will discuss your journey towards reaching data mesh. How do you get started, and what are some of the best practices to keep in mind? And finally, we're going to conclude by some real-world examples of data mesh in action. So starting with the definition, what is a data mesh? So a data mesh is a decentralized socio-technical approach to share, access, and manage analytical data in complex and large-scale environments. Now you might be wondering, how is that any different from any other data management approaches? And the answer would be the following. Data mesh involves a shift in assumptions, architecture, technology, and governance. As you see here from the image, it involves lots of transformations. First, it involves moving from a centralized data ownership and management by specialists towards a more decentralized ownership and accountability by business domains. Moreover, from an architectural point of view, we start shifting from monolithic data warehouses to a distributed mesh of data products accessed through standardized protocols. Now, when it comes to technology, we often heard or have seen data being treated as a byproduct, especially when it comes to traditional data management approaches like data warehousing, for example, while the data mesh advocates for seeing both data and the code that maintains it as one specific unit. From a governance point of view, we also shift from centralized with human intervention towards a more sophisticated, or should I even say federated model with computational policies embedded into the mesh, so you don't have to centralize your governance anymore. From a value system perspective, the shift also happens, but this time we stop seeing data as an asset and we start embracing the concept of seeing data as a product to serve and delight our data users. Last but not least, the infrastructure starts shifting from separate systems of data, many systems here and there, and operations as well, and we move towards one well-integrated set of both data and ops. Now, when it comes to the principles, it all culminates to 4 principles mainly, and these principles are as follows. Data is owned by a specific domain in a sense that it's much the same way that microservices each own a specific business function. The access to the data here is decentralized. The second principle of a data mesh is that we start seeing data as a product, and each team that publishes it is actually considering it as its own product. So they are wholly responsible of it, and they do start embracing the thinking of product-oriented approaches. The third principle is that data is available to anyone, anywhere in the company, but most importantly, all self-service. So say you're producing a report sale forecast for North Europe. You can find the source of the data you need to drive the report in few minutes, just getting the data into a database you have control to, and you can immediately get access to the insights that you need. As for the fourth principle, it's about governance. And as you all know, no data architecture is perfect and no data architecture is static. They will always evolve and grow, and governance is what ring fences this, allowing us to trust and more quickly navigate the data in the mesh. Now, while all these seem interesting, you might be wondering, okay, but what kind of benefits do I actually get from implementing a data mesh? Now, while organizations have seen many of the benefits, today we're going to focus only on 4. Starting by the first one, which is about making better informed decisions faster, data mesh empowers domain teams to onboard and manage their own data products, which eventually enables faster decision making and greater value extraction from the data. This contrasts with centralized data architectures like data warehousing, data lake, etc., where most of these traditional approaches are expertly handcrafted. They have many handcrafted between data creation and action, which usually results in very long analytical lead times. Now, for the second one, we see creating truly data-driven cultures of innovation. And what the data mesh does is that it puts end users of the data in control of how it is managed and used. So with domain teams as controllers of their own data products, this allows for better experimentation, exploration of new ideas, and incentives for ensuring coherent and well-maintained data products. This overall leads to a better culture of data quality, experimentation, and innovation across the organization. The third big benefit that we are having today is that supporting AI and machine learning initiatives, and as you all know, AI and machine learning have become essential capabilities in the modern enterprise, but they do require high quality and very relevant data sets to be effective. So from a data mesh perspective, where domain teams have control over their own data products, they can enable the creation and maintenance of these data sets, as well as experimentation with AI and machine learning use cases for sure. This by its turn does increase innovation and accessibility to AI and machine learning for more teams and domains. The last big benefit today is that organizations are able to respond faster to emerging regulations, and in some industries where regulations make big impacts and make big changes, let's say banking, it's very critical for companies and organizations to react faster and respond faster to these regulations. And thanks to the improved visibility, quality, and governance models enabled across the data mesh, this became much more easier for companies. Now, all of this does not come without challenges, as of any other implementation or any other IT or technology-related projects. And for today, we chose to focus on 3 specific categories of challenges. Some of them are organizational, some are technical organizational, and then the last category is technical. But when it comes to organizational, budget comes at the top of the list. Sometimes domains might not have sufficient funds for infrastructure or development or delivery or maintenance of their data products, and as more complexity and volumes increase, costs might become unaffordable for some of those domains. The second challenge is about how centralized is your organization, because data mesh is mainly an organizational transformation. Part of it is technology, but for sure, the transformational part in the organization plays a major role, which does require a strong support and a clear strategy and action plan, and awareness within the organization to avoid failure. It's not that easy to shift from a centralized perspective to a decentralized one, so some support is always necessary to make data mesh implementation a success. Now, when it comes to technical organizational, the problem you might face is a technical skills shortage. When you start delegating ownership of the data to your domains, this requires more knowledge and training for your people. And ignoring this can lead to performance issues later on. So knowledge of data engineering and having the necessary data culture and skills within each and every data domain are crucial for this success. Now, when it comes to the technical part, one of the aspects I would like to mention is the governance. And with a decentralized architecture as a data mesh, it does require more attention to governance so that we can ensure a consistent setup of cloud infrastructure and standards for data products. When a central team is not present, knowledge must be documented to ensure consistency and accessibility. For the other part, moving to best practices for starting and building a data mesh, these are some of the tips that were mainly recognized by many industry experts and organizations who already were successful in building a data mesh. The first one is choosing the right pilot project. So it's always fascinating to go big and build everything at once. But when starting with a data mesh, it is recommended to begin with a small pilot project within one domain team. This will eventually allow you to learn valuable lessons before implementing everything across the organization. The second tip is don't wait on the perfect platform. There probably isn't a perfect platform, but as you implement your pilot project and plan for wider adoption for your data mesh, be ambitious, but most importantly, you have to be reasonable. Because nowadays, data teams should be realistic and define KPIs they can actually achieve. The third tip for today is defining self-service for yourself, and the domain-oriented architecture and self-service data infrastructure for an organization usually depends on the business needs. So that usually will require some identification and some effort in discovery to actually understand the real needs and start assessing idealized scenarios. It does not always mean the same for each and every company. The fourth step is define domains to thrive independently, and this one is very important. So to implement a data mesh, you should look at similarities in how teams use data to achieve their objectives. Once domains are determined, staff the domain teams with the relevant cross-functional talent and domain expertise to thrive independently. That way, you can easily accelerate the implementation and afterwards the success of your data mesh. Now, the last tip is focus on building trustworthy data products. Teams today must establish early rules and governance for building your data products, including determining essential attributes, enforcing standards and policies, and making decisions locally. Organizations often prefer clear standards and trustworthy discoverable data products. Now, there might be lots of best practices out there, but I believe this initial set of best practices tends to keep you focused in your journey and always focus on what matters and delivering value. Although the data mesh now in many companies is in its early stages, there are some early adopters. People just started building, some are successful, some are still in their journey. It never ends. But today I wanted to share with you some real-world examples of data mesh in action. These are only 3 among others, but the reasoning behind my choice is the following. These are 3 companies. Flexport implemented their data mesh on Snowflake. JP Morgan Chase & Co. they implemented on AWS, and Amadeus implemented on Azure, while there are other companies who also implemented on Google Cloud. So the reasoning behind my choice is for you to have a successful data mesh, It does not depend on which vendor you're choosing or which technology you have to choose. It's mostly about the organizational transformation that goes with that technology that makes it a success. So please do focus on the importance of that part more than anything else, because I believe that most providers nowadays are able to leverage some strength for your data mesh. The choice I will detail today, or the use case or the example, I'm gonna go a bit into details, is the Flexport one. So for those of you who don't know the company, Flexport exists to make global trade easy for everyone, more than 10,000 clients and suppliers across 200 countries. So as you can imagine, they have lots of data and they need some flexibility, some performance metrics, and all that goes with it so that they are able to serve all those clients. Now, their challenge was the following. They really needed a robust data platform for unique global trade industry challenges. So what happened is, when Flexport tried to migrate their legacy data warehouse towards a data mesh, they improved their query performance, they reduced time-consuming administrative work, and freed up technical talent to focus on higher impact work. Their main challenge was that they really needed a solution that could allocate compute resources on the fly for production and external use cases where latency mattered. The results that the company reached were impressive, of course, along many other organizations, but for Flexport specifically, they were able to deliver their data as a product, and they successfully implemented their data mesh strategy, which eventually led to a healthier product development process that considers data as a product, but not anymore as a data byproduct. So analytics engineers were very essential members for Flexport's development teams, and they partnered with product managers, engineering managers, and software engineers to successfully design, launch, and govern their data products. An important thing from their journey as well is that this decentralization that came with the data mesh made it much easier for Flexport to actually identify potential data issues and ensure data qualities. As per a quote from one of their employees, they said that we prefer to drive all of this through data owners, but just not as like some data Caesar somewhere. Data governance through the data mesh allowed them greater scalability and confidence to democratize access to their trusted data. According to them, since shifting to data mesh, they were able to reach the following result. So 5.5 times more people were able to use data across the business on a regular basis, which is impressive from a data usage and a data access perspective. So the lessons we would like to take from today is that data mesh is this newly created approach that takes things differently. We're no longer centralizing things. We're moving to a decentralized and empowering users and treating the data the way it should. But the lessons that are important is it's not only about technology, it's also about organizational transformation, and it's what we really need to put the effort into and organize some awareness sessions and also encourage the organization and push this forward, because the buy-in of the different stakeholders is much more important as well. And implementing a data mesh is not a one step or one thing and it's over. It's always a journey of improvement, but the results are definitely worth it. So that's basically it for today, and I'm really looking forward to hear your feedback and questions in the chat. But if it happens that you reflected on these and you still have some couple of questions, I'd be very happy to answer your questions through email or contact me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to take that forward. That's it for today, and thank you very much for listening.
Example of data mesh.
So basically, an example of data mesh is, as I mentioned, implementation of Flexport, for example, or JP Morgan Chase, or many other companies. Data mesh implementation does depend from a company to another or from an organization to another. And the reason why this depends or why it differs from one to the other is that, like we mentioned, it's not only about the technology, there's also this organizational structure into it that heavily depends. So it's the way you interact with the mesh that shapes it into your own mesh within the organization. But overall, if the data mesh respects the 4 principles as mentioned, seeing data as a product, the governance, the self-service platform, and so on, that ideally should reflect the correct structure of a data mesh. And I also see another question here. I hope I answered the question, by the way, but if it's not answered, please let me know so that I can detail further.
Perfect.
I see another question here. What practical implementation where value of this has been realized? It's like doing back and forth. Earlier it was moved to centralized and now to decentralized. How this can give single version of truth, or it will create silos of data at multiple places. Now, it's true that there has been lots of approaches on how to tackle data management approaches. And what might be beneficial for one context might not be for another company. So data mesh is not always the right answer for every company, and data warehouse is not always the best answer for each and every company. So identifying the right solution really requires some assessment from many perspectives and levels, especially the needs of the organization and what do you really want to build, what's the intention, what's the value you would like to provide. It's more about the value than about how do we do it itself, because when you define what is needed and you know what value you want to deliver, then it comes a bit easier to identify how to do it the right way and how to build it and what is it really required in your solution, and that would define which option you would go to. Now you might argue that with the data mesh and separating this into data nodes might put data in silos. That was one of the concerns that was raised. But the truth is, when you embrace the data mesh the right way and respecting its principles, and you're having this governance in place, it's rarely that this data will become separated in silos. So it's always about the implementation and having that governance practice in place and always keeping a close eye and monitoring where's your data mesh going to. I see another question from Erez. At the Flexport example, I understand that they used their data mesh for internal and external customers. If so, could you please share an example for one of those external products? I can happily share an example of that, although I'm currently much more aware of the percentages, like the statistics that they improved internally. So their business users were more able to use their data. I'm not very much aware of the external products, but my assumption would be the following. Given the results that they had internally and the amount of I would say the performance that they got and everything related to their data usage, I'm sure they were able to deliver some higher insights and some capabilities that enabled them to serve their customers better. Another question, any suggestions of product already on the market looking into the implementation of data mesh? So I'm not sure I understand the question correctly, but if it's about vendors, there are lots of vendors out there that might make your data mesh implementation easier, but it always depends on like the organizational part as well. So although vendors might promise that they will deliver the best technology, which can be true, cannot be, it depends on the solution itself. But I believe a big part of the success of data mesh is really this organizational structure and pushing internal users and domains and the organizations towards the right path and really embracing this new data culture. I see another question. Any book can you recommend to read about it? Absolutely. There's this famous book of Samak that actually started the data mesh movement. It's called Data Mesh. I believe I can quickly share it into the chat. Let me just find it. Data Mesh, Samak. Yep, it's this one. And I will copy and paste the link into the chat as well. So the other question is, can cloud handle data mesh? I mean, any tool, yes. Cloud providers can actually enable you to build your data mesh. As we have seen in the real life examples, there were many companies that were able to leverage the cloud capabilities to build their data mesh, be it Azure, be it Google Cloud, be it AWS, even Snowflake delivered some amazing results, which is built on top of those other cloud providers. So that's definitely something you can use for your data mesh. I see another question that says, who should drive the data mesh initiative? Sponsoring, lead, why would the central data platform team support it? And would they not see such initiative as a threat to their own role in the company? Well, the way we should see this is that when we implement a data mesh, that does not mean that we no longer need a data team. It's just a restructuring somehow of our own resources in the company. First, the company should have like domain-driven design in the organization. So you have clear boundaries or clear separation of the domains in your organization. And then it becomes much easier to build a data mesh on top of that, on that structure, in a sense that in every data domain, you will have cross-functional teams. You will have data engineers, for example. You will have some data analytic engineers, like we have seen in the example of Flexports. And then you will have some product managers as well. It depends on each and every organization, but it's always important to know that we are not moving away from this data team. We're actually enabling them to scale their impact. Because let's imagine we are in an organization of, let's say, 1,000 employees, and you have even 100 data profiles in the company specifically to serve the data needs. Now, the truth is, at some point, you will not be able to scale all of those requests related to the data. Everything goes to their backlog. You need a small change in a database. You need to create this. You need to create that. You have to wait for longer periods. And the struggle as well is that if you go, for example, to a data analyst within your data team and ask him, is this data correct? Does it have the best quality? What does this actually mean? He will not be able to answer all of those questions on the long run. Now, while the company might be small, it's easier to gain business knowledge and keep track of all that important information that you need for your analysis. But the more your company grows, it's just impossible to have all that knowledge centralized for a data team. So I don't see it as a threat, but I do see it as an opportunity to scale value and impact within the organization. Sponsor the initiative. So given that it really requires an organizational structure around it and buy-in somehow, I believe that this should be supported by all stakeholders in the company. So whoever is building this needs to get the buy-in from stakeholders. He needs to clarify the value. He needs to make them see the impact of this initiative. How can they benefit better? How can we structure ourselves around this better? How can we ensure that we are getting the most out of it? In that sense, for leadership sponsorship, The way I would answer this, it's really a mix of profiles who are leading this data mesh implementation. Of course, you will have what they call a platform team, who initially deals with building the platform, self-service platform as we mentioned, and then you will have in each and every domain people who actually support the data initiatives. The thing is, once you separate this into domains, people start seeing and taking the ownership of their own data. So let's say I'm sales, for example, or any other data domain in my company. When I start taking ownership of my data, I do care about its quality. I know what it means for me to have better quality. I know what I want from the data. I know how can I use it better. So the opportunities are like without limits, but it's really, I would say, establishing this cultural change in the beginning, and it's not an easy thing to do, but with focusing on the value and impact, I believe it's always gonna be the way to prove value of this socio-technical approach. I hope that answered. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mathieu. Thank you everyone who asked the question. It was such a pleasure being here today and interacting with you. I hope this was really helpful for you guys and it offered an idea about the data mesh. Please do let me know if you have any feedback for me. I would love to hear it as well. Thank you very much, and I wish you a brilliant day. Thanks.